Like, what's the history of Pilates? What's the origin of it?
Pilates was started by an amazing guy called Joseph Pilates.
The different options people have within Pilates.
Reformer Pilates, but also Pilates using the apparatus, so using the big Cadillac machine. Then Joseph Pilates developed the mat method.
How long did it take you personally to see that shift in your symptoms?
Within a month, I had drastic improvements. If you have any kind of back issues or issues with alignment in the body, you need to focus all in on the core.
What am I gonna love the most, and what do people complain about the most?
For example, my husband, he is...
Bryony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to being here.
Yeah, so how did you get your start in wellness? I know a little bit about you in preparation for today's conversation, but let's go way back in time. Like how far back has wellness been a part of your life?
So I would say that I first discovered definitely Pilates, at least, maybe not full spectrum wellness at that point, when I was 18 after I had a car accident. So I had a car accident where I was left with injuries and had to wear a neck brace and things like that in college, which was not the most attractive look. And I was lucky enough actually to, after seeing several doctors, I was actually introduced to this amazing doctor who really believed in the power of movement to heal the body. So I had seen different doctors. I was put on actually tramadol at one point, antidepressants. Nothing was really working, and it was all just like kind of masking my pain rather than dealing with the root of it, until I found this one doctor who was really interested in healing the body through movement. And in particular, looking back, I realized it was through classical Pilates. So I would actually go into the hospital to see him as a form of almost like rehab for my body. And that moment really kind of transformed my life. And that was the first initial, I'd say, experience of wellness.
That is fascinating. So I guess let's go back to that diagnosis, and I'd love to dig into like the history of Pilates. What does it look like, sort of the myths and truths around it. So when were you diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis?
So funnily enough, the car accident came first, and then afterwards, and I don't know whether that kind of had some sort of impact on then later on.
Got it.
And not that long after being diagnosed with arthritis. But at the time when I was diagnosed, before I was diagnosed, they didn't really understand what it was because I was so young when I started to have symptoms, and they were very extreme symptoms. Like I couldn't tie my hair up, I couldn't pull a light switch, I couldn't grip. I would have these huge kind of like red swellings all over my hands, and there definitely wasn't anyone I knew at that age that had gone through something similar. So I think whenever I went to see the doctor, no one really knew what it could be or what route to explore, at least. And
got it. So the car accident happened first. Like this is before you were diagnosed with RA.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. So when you first, let's I guess start with that then. You heard about this sort of classical Pilates. Had you heard of Pilates before?
Never.
Did you have any?
Wow. I knew it was this practice that at the time older ladies did. It wasn't, which is so funny to think about now because it's just the coolest thing ever nowadays. Whereas at the time it was just nothing that anyone young did, and that's why I had to go into the hospital to do it. So yeah.
Right, you did Pilates in the hospital.
Yes.
This is before all the chic studios. Okay, so what if you could go like, what's the history of Pilates? What's the origin of it?
Yeah, so Pilates was started by an amazing guy called Joseph Pilates, who was a German anatomist. And he discovered actually during the First World War, he started to put springs. He was working in the hospitals, and he started to put springs on the hospital beds to help the patients with recovery. So it's just fascinating, and that's where now we see like the reformer and the Cadillac machine. That's where it came from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. So he really believed he was a very sickly child as well. So he dealt with his own issues, and he really was fascinated by the power of movement in a healing sense. So yeah, he then put it into practice in the hospitals, and then later in New York opened his first studio with his wife. So yeah.
Wow. Very cool. So you mentioned reformer.
Yeah.
Can you describe what that is? And like,
Sure.
there's different types of Pilates. I know sometimes you're just on a mat. Sometimes you're on some contraption.
Yeah, exactly.
Walk people visually the different options people have within Pilates.
So nowadays you have so many different options, but if I go back to kind of the traditional form, you have a reformer Pilates, but also Pilates using the apparatus. So using the big Cadillac machine, the Wonder Chair, different things like that. That is Pilates with apparatus from the classical method. So that's kind of where it all started. Then Joseph Pilates developed the mat method. So it was almost like homework for the equipment, and it was a way where you could really connect your body without hiding behind anything else, and it was something that you could stick to consistently and almost like take home with you. So you have classical mat, classical reformer. Nowadays you also have contemporary reformer like Legree, or you have contemporary mat. But definitely my method actually combines the two, classical and contemporary. But I think it's just so important to have the classical foundation. It's such an amazing practice. If you haven't tried it before, you would just love it.
Yeah. So when you started, and you were doing classical, was it on a reformer then, and you did the homework with the classical mat at home? Yeah,
so he would kind of take me around his, hospital office, and he would have different pieces of equipment that we would use, and anything from, the big apparatus to a ball or a mat or whatever, and he would just take me through different movements and then give me exercises to do at home. And again, it was at the time where I certainly just felt like, okay, I'm healed now. It wasn't like consistency. The word didn't really exist. We didn't realize the power of consistency, and it's not just like a one-time thing. So I definitely, once I had saw him and done the homework at home, I was like, right, I don't need to continue this now. And there was no kind of sustainable way to, I didn't see that way at that time. Like, none of my friends were doing it. So yeah, I thought, okay, this is me done now. But I was also at the same time amazed by the impact it had, taken me off the painkillers, taken me off the antidepressants that was helping me sleep. I felt really well.
So you saw a dramatic improvement in how you felt. How long did it take you personally to see that shift in your symptoms?
After working with him, I would say within a month, I had drastic improvements. And I went from, I was commuting at the time. So I had to sit on a train, and I remember I was sitting on a train for about an hour and a half, and I was like holding myself up the whole time because I was in so much pain. I couldn't find a position, and then all of a sudden I was just like, wow, it relieved me of that pain. And I remember one thing that's always stuck with me that he said was, if you have any kind of back issues or issues with alignment in the body, my pelvis was twisted forward, for example. He said, this is all, you need to focus all in on the core. The core is going to help rebuild you and give you that support system. So yeah, I'll never forget that.
I love it. So at what point did you realize after that you mentioned your method and like really putting this out into the world and, bringing it to the masses? What did that journey look from your own journey to wanting to share it with the world?
So actually it was years later. I always found if I had, then when I got rheumatoid arthritis, I found myself going back to Pilates. And then again, I was like, okay, now I'm better, and losing the rhythm of it. And then it wasn't until actually which we discussed on your podcast briefly, when I kind of went through this period of depression where my mum, it was actually during or just before we went into lockdown, but my mum was diagnosed with cancer and my business closed. Like I had all these things kind of happening at once, which I'm sure so many people can relate to over COVID and lockdown and everything. But I just felt I couldn't get out of this like fog that was kind of hovering over me. And that is when I went all in on sharing my method. I'd already done my qualification by that point, not really thinking I would go anywhere with it, just thinking, you know, I could do this for myself. And then I only taught, or was only brave enough to start teaching my method March 21, I think it was. Yeah, so not that long ago. And I started with like 10 people on Zoom. And then it grew, you know, the next week was 20 people on Zoom and 50 people. And it really had this organic snowball effect. And I remember I was like consistently getting 100 people joining my Zoom classes a few times a week. And then I did this big January challenge where I had like 550 people live 5 times a week. Sign up to pay, I think it was £200, and they all signed up, and we were like this really powerful community. And yeah, that was kind of the start of what is now my app, and now, you know, we have thousands of subscribers, and it's just the best thing ever. I love what I do.
That's such amazing paradox, I guess, of that time, right? When people were all at home. It was an insane time in human history, the pandemic, but it did bring people together in such a weird way, right?
Yeah.
There's this sort of collective experience that everybody went through, and people were at home more or all the time, and they got to connect with people that with their busy lives, they probably never, with that sort of amount, they were hundreds of people doing a Pilates class in their living room during the pandemic.
Exactly. And also it was, as you say, it was a funny time because although we were also isolated, at the same time, you had this real sense of community. So it was so interesting that we were kind of on our own, but actually you felt the power of community. And one thing I loved, which we've kept as our main focus in the app now, but I loved the conversations I was having with these people taking my classes afterwards. So we were, you know, I could see all their little faces on Zoom. I remember one time someone joined, I think from Canada or something, and it was like her 2 a.m. And she told me on the class, and I was like, what? You know, this is just unbelievable. But that real sense of community, like, powered that time, especially for me. I definitely, it carried me through for sure.
I love it. So you mentioned your method blends classical with contemporary.
Yeah.
What does that look like on a practical level? Like, what can I expect if I'm showing up on a class on the app? Like, what am I going to be doing?
Yeah. So mat classical takes you through a repertoire of moves, and it's amazing. And as I said, it's just so unbelievable for posture, mobility, alignment, strength, mind-body connection, but it can get very repetitive. So you might find that, for example, you're doing this classical work, but then you're like, you know, I'm not necessarily looking forward to it. And that was my experience and the people around me's experience. So I thought, okay, there has to be a way where I can blend the foundational moves of classical seamlessly into the fun, contemporary, you know, strength building, results driven moves from the contemporary world. So yeah, it kind of took away the mundane element of Pilates, and I say that with so much respect for the classical world, because it is Pilates, it's true Pilates. But for me, the consistency was key. That was what was important, and I wanted to create a workout that people really looked forward to and enjoyed. And I thought, if I can do that, then they're going to show up every day. They're going to realize that actually movement can feel really good. So that was working.
That's amazing. See, it's fun. They could stick with it, like you said. Consistency is key. So no matter how, like, the classical, which helps so many people, but if the average person's not going to stick with it because it gets boring and mundane, then what's the point if they show up to one classical Pilates class? So you're absolutely right, and that sort of pragmatic approach, and there's different modalities, right? You sort of can make it your own by bringing in the sort of contemporary aspects of it. So what are some of the hardest moves? Like, I've never done Pilates in my life. I've never done your method. So, like, I'm showing up to the class on the app.
Oh my God.
What am I gonna love the most, and what do people complain about the most when it comes to, like, it's so good but it's so difficult?
Well, firstly, straight after this, I'm going to send you access to the app. I'm so excited to hear your opinion. But for example, my husband, he is very into weight training. He's super healthy, super fit, very, good on his nutrition, all these things. He started doing Pilates, and he said it's the most humbling thing he's ever experienced. And I think one of the kind of surprising moves, or not surprising, but the thing is with Pilates is when you see it, everyone thinks that looks so easy. The second you do it, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know my body could shake like that. And
that's what I hear time and time again. They're like, it looks easy, but it's like, it will kick your butt.
Yeah, seriously. And so one move, for example, a teaser. That is like a real kind of like uncovering move for everyone. And it's the one thing that I really miss actually being, I'm continuing my movement throughout pregnancy, but I have to make certain modifications. And one thing I can't do is a full teaser, so I'm missing it. But a teaser, what it will do is it will really work on your spinal mobility, because you have to articulate through the spine as you lift your body up without using any momentum. And at the same time, you're really lengthening through your feet, connecting to your heels. But you're also using that deep core strength. As you roll your body up, you're lifting your legs. So you're kind of in this like almost like a V shape with your body, and your arms are reaching towards your feet. You can then add on so many advanced moves by, circling the arms, lowering and lifting the legs, and you feel just your core like you've never felt it before. And doing moves like that, and Pilates in general, what is so interesting is not only is it the most, in my opinion, sustainable form of movement. Like, we can do this every single day. Whereas, weight training, you can't do every single day. Yoga, you're going into your flexibility if you're doing that every day. Whereas Pilates, especially classical Pilates, is so sustainable, but it's also an amazing complementary form of movement to the weight training. So my husband, for example, he's like, oh my God, I'm moving completely different in the gym because I'm moving connected to my core, or I'm lifting from my core, or, it's just amazing what it teaches you about your body.
Oh my gosh. My wife has taken Pilates before, and that's what she says to me. Like, you are going to be working muscles you have never worked out before when you do this. Like, I didn't know I could be sore there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And you think I do upper body, I do push and pull, I do core. No, it's not the same. You are working out completely different muscles, or muscles in a different way than it's ever been worked out before. And my wife would describe it to me as like, they'll be like, okay, move your left pinky toe a certain way to like get a certain muscle that you wouldn't get if you didn't move your pinky toe that way. Exactly. Can you explain that, like that sort of level of detail?
Yes. So
and specificity.
For example, if you were in there's a classical move called the 100, where your legs are in the air or at an angle, and your arms are reaching down by your side, and you're pumping your arms up and down, and you're very much in your core. If I then tell you to point and flex your feet at the same time, what happens then in your core is so unbelievable, because that point and flex of your feet feeds all the way down through the legs into your abs, and it has such a dramatic effect. And I think it's a movement, like you say, and like your wife said, we're not used to moving that way. And it's so incredible, the tiny little tweaks that you can make and that you can do at home so easily, that have such an amazing impact. And they're really working your core on a deep level, and not just the core. You know, we're moving the whole body as one, but the difference is the core is always engaged.
Yeah, which, like you're saying, it's so, I mean, we can kind of tie it to the chronic pain and so many people's issues with their back. But like, I noticed that even with myself, you're convicting me. It's like to implement this and weave this in with my weight training, because I'll look at myself in the mirror and say, like, I know my form isn't the best with certain things because of certain things that are weaker than others. And like with my renegade rows or the RDLs, and it's like, yeah, I'm tweaking myself in real time to like compensate for that sort of maybe not the best form. But it's, if I did something like Pilates, I would just naturally have the good form. I wouldn't have to just like autocorrect during the exercise.
Exactly, and it becomes, I mean, of course, in the beginning, it's like a discipline, but it becomes second nature, which is when you've really kind of tapped into the power of it. But something I start at the beginning of every single class, whether it's, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 45 minutes, is this really simple breathwork exercise, which you could also do before your weight training session. So in actually a lot of people use it during pregnancy, which is called the 360 breath. Some people call it that. But if you inhale and really expand into your rib cage, so you're feeling your rib cage really opening out, and on the exhale, you're drawing your rib cage in, pulling your belly button back to the spine. That is connecting your breath to your core. So if we're able to then implement that in your weight training, so for example, you're using your exhale on the effort. So let's say you're in the squat rack and you know you're lifting really, really heavy. If you're inhaling on the way down, you're really using that breath, and then as you exhale to lift, you're grounding down through the heels of your feet, but you're pulling the rib cage in. So you're lifting from the strongest possible center. So imagine if you did that without turning on your core whatsoever. I mean, what a waste of time. Don't we want to like have it stack and make it much more efficient? So I think even if you haven't tried Pilates, that breath work, even just doing 3 of those really deep breaths, will just make your movement a little bit more intentional.
Oh, so good. I will utilize that, and I'm gonna take your classes too. I'm gonna give it a go. Okay, so for your journey with RA, with rheumatoid arthritis, there's a lot of people that listen to the podcast that have autoimmunity or have someone they love with autoimmunity. So specifically with RA, autoimmunity, but chronic, like tying it into chronic pain too. And you mentioned going back to Pilates because you were diagnosed with this. What was that like to hear the news you had RA? I mean, what were you going through at the time?
So for me, it was like I was half relieved that there was a diagnosis to then hopefully pinpoint what I could do in terms of helping it. But I was also quite upset because in my mind, arthritis was what my grandma had. So I'm like, oh my God, you know, your brain goes to such a negative place, but actually now, I mean, touch wood, I have been living with arthritis for such a long time and I have no symptoms anymore, no symptoms whatsoever. And I'm careful when I say that because I'm really aware of how many people that suffer with conditions like this, but I also want to say it because there are small things that I've done that have completely changed my life. You know, Pilates, this practice of creating alignment in my body, but also reducing my stress levels. Another thing that's been amazing for me with rheumatoid arthritis is infrared saunas, which I'm really missing during pregnancy. You can't do those, but I've loved. I've seen such an impact on saunas. I do hot and cold therapy, but I think the thing that's making the impact is the heat. Because cold was something I could never, you know, if I stood outside, my fingers would like completely freeze over and it would just be agony to, you know, get them back to a comfortable position. But yeah, it's amazing the tools that we can do that make a difference.
Amazing. So let's go through that. When you first had your symptoms, how bad were they? Like, what were you experiencing? Let's start like before you implemented your protocol.
Yeah, so before, this was even years before it was diagnosed, I was working on a makeup counter and I couldn't pick up a makeup brush. So I was supposed to be doing, you know, people's makeup, and I was finding it really hard to grip the brush. I was finding as well, like if I, for example, like brushed past something that you wouldn't even notice, that would be like real agony for me. So I kind of just experienced that day to day. And again, no one really knew what it was. I then had this cortisone injection, which seemed to have an impact, you know, in the short term, but then obviously it just came back. So that's kind of what I was experiencing. And also just when you get out of bed, you're like, oh, you feel like 100 years old. And obviously when I started experiencing it, I was super young. So that was kind of what I was experiencing. And it wasn't till I lived in Switzerland for a couple of years. And when I was actually in Switzerland, I went to see this specialist, and it was that specialist that finally diagnosed it.
Got it. Do you have a family history of autoimmune conditions?
Yeah, so my mom has it and my grandma has it. Yeah.
Has RA?
Yeah.
Has RA. Okay. So when you were diagnosed, how soon after did you kind of lean back into that movement medicine of classical Pilates?
Well, to me, any kind of like hardcore HIIT training or anything like that wasn't an option. It was something that I was trying to push through, but I just couldn't. My body was just completely telling me no. So that's when I went. I'm someone that really loves being active. So that's when I went back and really lent into the Pilates practice, because it was the only thing that made me feel good.
Yeah. And that's something that you said earlier that I really want to touch on, because whether you have RA or another health issue, or just as we age, like the wear and tear, I think there's a lot of exercises that we do, even if you have the best form, it still over time can be really stressful on the body, right? A lot of HIIT training, a lot of burpees, a lot of weight training, a lot of running. It could be the wear and tear can be hard. This is different, right? I mean, this is something that is, yes, we're strengthening, but it's something we could do no matter where we're at, no matter what our ability is or where we're at as far as our limitations or biomechanical problems or aging, et cetera. It's just something for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a practice that is not breaking down your body, but it's really serving your body, but it's also serving your mind. And I think what's really cool about it, or another cool thing, is that when you're doing classical based Pilates or this method of Pilates, you are so in tune with the small micro changes or form corrections. You're so in tune with your body. Before you know it, you have just experienced, 15, 30, 45 minutes of just complete quietness in your mind, because you're so in your body. So the meditative effects it has are just unbelievable. And as you said about, HIIT training and things, the CEO of our company, he loves running, but he always experiences pain in his ankles and in his shins from running. And he now does Pilates every single morning. He's fully embraced his role, but he now, well, firstly, he lost 4 stone adding Pilates from home.
Amazing.
And he just feels great, but his pain in running has gone. So it's just amazing the impact that these kind of complementary workouts can have. You don't have to only do Pilates. You could maybe add it in and really see a difference in the form of movement you do really love.
Yeah. So what do you think it was for you with the RA or someone with the chronic pain? Is it the stabilization? Is it the form correcting that you're noticing? What is sort of the mechanism of action, I guess, of why it helps so greatly with your pain levels?
I think there were so many different factors. I think the stress of everything had a huge impact when I started doing Pilates. I really reduced my stress levels. I also think that, and I don't know what I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but for me, I was holding a lot of tension in my hips and in my pelvis, but also in my spine. I think we can hold a lot of trauma in our body, especially in the spine. And for me, with Pilates, the articulation of the spine it's something that you forget to do, and it's something that's so important, I think, when it comes to, you know, movement in everyday life, posture, how you walk into a room, and also longevity. One of Joseph Pilates' famous quotes was, "You're only as young as your spine is healthy." And I think having that spinal health and mobility and flexibility and everything really had an impact on my pain and inflammation.
Wow, that is so good. You touched on a key point that we see a lot clinically with people that have autoimmunity, have chronic pain, is that sort of, yes, there's physiological things to deal with environmental toxins, gut health, right, nutrient deficiencies, things that you can directly quantify on labs and address, right? But then there's sort of that mental, emotional, spiritual side of it, the sort of somatic side of how does chronic stress and unresolved past trauma, how is that stored in the body? And it is typically, you're right, it's the hips, it's the spine, it's the fascia. And you're really mobilizing somatically. I haven't, shame on me, but I haven't really thought of Pilates as a somatic practice for stress and trauma, but it really is.
It really is. And another kind of way that Joseph Pilates describes it is it's like an internal shower. And you really have that feeling after you've done a Pilates workout. You feel like you've really connected to your body. You've almost like, it's, you know, like a wet towel that you're like wringing out. You feel like brand new afterwards. And I do feel that it's not only the spiritual side of things, but I think, you know, the attention to detail that you are paying to your own body throughout, like, you know, an articulation or a different movement is just like none other. I really wish that everyone could try Pilates because it's just so beneficial.
Do you see people cry, not from pain, but cry because of a release, a somatic release from the class?
Yeah, when we have our, and I'm actually one of them, when we do our community events, we, you know, get these incredible people together in one room, and it's such a moment. It's such a release for a lot of people, a mental release, an emotional release. I also think not only are they having that feeling from their body, but they're also having that community aspect as well. But yeah, I've really noticed it, and I think on an emotional level, what's really interesting, certainly that I've noticed with me and my community, is the confidence it gives you. So the confidence it builds, and kind of what you think you're just doing Pilates, but then it has this like whole knock-on effect to other areas of your life. So I was super shy, hated public speaking. I could like cry at the thought of getting up and saying thank you to 10 people in a room. And Pilates has like unlocked this like inner strength in me, this inner confidence and power where nothing phases me now. I don't get nervous. And I think that's amazing on a kind of spiritual, emotional level as well.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about visualization as part of your practice and your method. Can you talk about that? It's something that I haven't talked really about on the podcast, and I'd love to get into.
Yeah, sure. So I think visualization is often kind of not really kind of spoken about, but manifestation is spoken about a lot. But I think visualization is more an actual mindset tool that we can implement every day. So it's something that we can tangibly do and act on that may then lead to, you know, manifesting your dreams or whatever it is. But in terms of what I kind of do for my visualization process is, and I can share this story with you because you know Lauren and Michael, but as I just said, I hadn't been nervous for such a long time. And then all of a sudden, Lauren and Michael invited me onto their podcast. I think it was 2 Januaries ago in Austin. So I was flying out there. And for the first time in forever, I was like really nervous out of the blue. So I did my visualization technique, which was to basically imagine the exact scenario. So close my eyes, put myself in that moment, in that exact moment, me walking into the room, you know, how they respond to me, what's my body language like, what's their body language like, what are we saying, are we, you know, greeting. I would think about every single detail. And then afterwards, how would they tell me I had done? You know, I wanted to kind of get that positive feedback loop in my brain beforehand. And then I would journal exactly what I had just imagined. So I would then write every detail down. And so, for example, on that particular example, I said, oh, and then they're going to think I'm so great on a mic, and, you know, they're going to think I'm amazing. They'll ask me to do a podcast with Dear Media. And then it happened. So it's proof that it works.
I love that.
But yeah, I find it such a useful tool. It's almost like being your own hype person. So it's getting into the zone, you know, like thinking positive, but really filling yourself up with that belief. I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
Well, and it's alignment, right? It's like alignment, tapping into sort of the resonance of our life, which there's like, discord and moving in alignment. And I think a lot of people, they're going upstream constantly, right? And it's not a perfect, science, right? The science has to catch up with even understanding the ineffable of all of these things.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what the placebo effect is. The placebo effect's not a bad thing. Placebo effect is showing mind over matter, is that the power of suggestion, the power of will, the power of intention shifts biochemistry and can shift states externally as well, not just internally. And there's the nocebo effect, which is the opposite, whereas people believe that they are going to die from an illness, and then they can, die. And then there's a report that I talk about somewhere, but one of the books that I wrote is this case study where the man was diagnosed with a terminal disease. He died. They did the autopsy, and there was no disease. There was none.
Wow.
He just killed himself through worry and dread and all that negativity. And that's an extreme example, but I think we all can see this nocebo effect in our life of like the power of belief, the power of intention and faith and all of these things, and how someone that's filled with all those sort of negative ruminating thoughts, these limiting beliefs, how does that manifest in their life? It's like, we don't have randomized control trials for all of these things, but we can see it in our life. And science, we need science on this stuff, because it's a reality, whether there's RCTs for it or not.
Definitely. And just to go back to that time in COVID, just on what you said, my mom, she had cancer, and she taught me in that time the power of your words, the power of your thoughts, your mind. And she used to say, like, oh, I never would say why me, because I would never wish this on someone else. Like, I don't want anyone else to go through this. I can handle this. I've got this. And she would walk like an hour and a half to chemo, an hour and a half back from chemo, be there all day. She wore the cold cap. She did all these things every week, and it was very intense, but she just had this like incredible mindset that really, like, the lessons she taught me in that time are just, it's just completely changed my life. But just to go back to visualization, I think I was, on the surface, you'd think I was a confident person, but I had very low self-worth. And it's something that my friend Peter Crone, maybe you know him.
I know Peter.
Yeah,
I know Peter.
he's
Tell
the
Peter
best.
I said hi.
Oh, he's the best. Yeah. Well, he said to me, Bryony, you have confidence, but you have low self-worth. And I was like, aren't they the same? But, naively, he then taught me everything about that and the difference. And I really realized that was my missing link. And I think the visualization has really helped me with the self-worth, because it's given me almost that like belief system before going into something that maybe I would tell myself before, imposter syndrome or something like that would start to creep in.
Yeah, so good. I love that you know Peter Crone. He was on the podcast years ago, but I've known him offline as well, just as a human. Okay, so a few other tools that you use. You use movement medicine. You use your method to help with your pain. You mentioned infrared sauna. You mentioned cold plunging. Did you mention red light as well? Do you use red light therapy? Or?
I do infrared saunas.
Infrared sauna. So infrared, not separate red light, but
No.
infrared sauna, cold plunging, contrast therapy. What's your protocol? Your sort of cold plunge, infrared sauna, contrast protocol?
So I would typically, and again, just a caveat, I don't do this right now, being pregnant, but I typically would do kind of around minimum 20 minutes in the infrared sauna at about 70 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is Fahrenheit. And I would try and stack that as well with putting my legs up the wall and maybe playing a sound bath or doing a visualization or a meditation, something like that. And then I would go into the ice bath. I would never time myself in the ice bath because I would just do whatever I could tolerate, whatever I could push myself to, because some days I would notice that my fingers would maybe get a little bit more sensitive than others. And maybe that was around like my cycle or something. But yeah, I would never like time the ice bath. And if I didn't have an ice bath to hand, because obviously you don't have that wherever you go, but I would do a cold shower. And I also found the cold shower really effective as well, because it kind of just like shifts gears. There's something about it that just puts me in this like this killer kind of mindset where I'm like, I've got this. It almost
Amazing.
like shocks the system.
Yeah. Oh no, I love it. I love it / hate it, but it's I don't like it but you can appreciate it pretty quickly once the initial shock. It's weird, right? Because you just really can appreciate it for what it is, and it is a very somatic experience too. And it has been shown to do many things: lower inflammation, improve BDNF, increase dopamine, lots of increased vagal tone. There's a lot of very interesting things that I recommended to telehealth patients.
Definitely.
Contrast therapy specifically. Ending on cold. Look, I think, like you said, there are caveats. Sometimes, like lower temperature isn't always the name of the game. Sometimes it's just a cold shower and not a cold plunging. Yeah. But it can be a tool for people who need it, and certainly inflammatory problems and pain is one of them.
Yeah.
And I had to Google it because I didn't know. You'd think I would know. All the times I've been in Europe, I should know Celsius. But 70 is 158 Fahrenheit. So it's like a moderate amount. It's good. It's not like excessively hot, which is another thing. More isn't always better with infrared. And compared to traditional saunas, you don't need those high heats all the time to kind of activate the musculoskeletal benefits with the infrared, plus the heat shocking proteins that happens with the heat can happen at lower temperatures. You don't have to be, super high over 200 Fahrenheit to see the benefits, and you're proof of that. Yeah. Are there any other food changes, biohacks, supplements, peptides, anything else in your journey were needle movers for your healing journey?
So it's so difficult to pinpoint, but one thing that did drastically change was I started drinking matcha. I also launched a matcha company because of my obsession. But I also, at the time of having rheumatoid arthritis, I had very bad acne. So I just feel like my whole system was just crying out for help. And since adding matcha, my skin is just, I never, touch wood, suffer with breakouts anymore. And that's just from having two matchas a day. And I feel as well, matcha's high in L-theanine. Maybe that's having an impact on calming me down and my nervous system. But another thing I tried at the time was cutting out dairy. So I was never a big dairy lover anyway, especially cow's milk. It didn't agree with me, but I just completely cut out all dairy. And I do think that had an impact. But saying that, now I eat a lot of Greek yogurt and skyr yogurt. And I don't feel like introducing those two things. And I have butter every now and then. That hasn't had an adverse effect.
Amazing. And is it true, did I read this correctly, that your husband is the brains behind Joe and the Juice? Is that true?
Yes, he's the founder of Joe and the Juice, yeah.
What? Is he Joe? Is he Joe?
He's Joe, but Joe doesn't exist, but he's Joe, yeah. So, Joe comes from a cup of Joe is like a cup of coffee. So coffee and the juice, but he is the guy in the, the whole,
That's so funny.
He opened the first store on his own, and yeah.
Wow. In Denmark?
Yeah, the first
where was
store
he
was
at?
in Denmark, and
Okay.
now it's crazy. I think there's maybe
It's
like
everywhere.
400 or 500 stores.
Look, yeah, I mean, look, here's the deal. I live in a small town in the country in Pennsylvania. The closest airport is the Pittsburgh airport. There is a Joe and the Juice in the Pittsburgh airport. If you're in the Pittsburgh airport, you have a store everywhere.
Wow.
That's my rule of thumb.
That's when you know you've made it.
That's a sign of success.
Well,
But
in the
yeah.
airport in Copenhagen, there's like 5 Joe and the Juices. Crazy.
Wow. How did you two meet?
So we were actually set up on a blind date. We met at Chiltern Firehouse, but a guy actually, one of my friends I met on holiday when I was with an ex-boyfriend years ago, and we just all became friends. You know those holidays where like you kind of form this group and you're all just hanging out by the end of it. Anyway, so years later, he just said, "Oh, I have this guy for you. I cannot believe I haven't thought about this. Like, you're his perfect thing. He's your pet, whatever." And then, yeah, we went on this double date, and things have, I mean, we've been together, 3 years? We've got married. I'm 5 months pregnant. So we haven't wasted time. Yeah.
And you're both building these amazing businesses. I mean, multiple ones for you. It's really cool. What
Thank
a blessing.
you.
What a blessing. All that came out of little old COVID. See? Silver linings.
I know,
Silver
exactly.
linings.
Yeah. That's
So,
true.
So what's next for you? You have this amazing, what's the name of the matcha company?
It's Cloudcha. Cloudchamatcha.com. Yeah. So like
Love
a
it,
cloud.
Love it. So what's next for you?
So we are really expanding the app. The app is, my absolute passion project, my baby. We have this huge community. Our community are talking on WhatsApp every single day, all day. It's amazing, tips, having that accountability with one another. So we're growing that. I'm also really growing our pre-postnatal section of the app in real time. So I'm really, doing the workouts myself as time's ticking. So we're building out that and just, really focusing on the app. We have, whilst I am obviously in the prenatal friendly zone, we are adding certain different guest experts onto the app. So we're getting, amazing strength training athletes, Olympic athletes on there. And just putting everything into the app and growing the matcha business. Although there's a global shortage of matcha right now. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
So
What's going on with the matcha?
That's thrown a bit of a spanner in the works in the matcha industry. But
why? Why is there a shortage right now?
I think demand was just so high, and it is still, a niche product, and it's there's only a certain amount of matcha farms, and but no, it's growing, and we're getting more stockists, but it's taking a bit more time with that issue. But so just really focusing on spreading this form of wellness to as many people as possible. And also my podcast, growing the podcast. It's
yes, congratulations.
Thank you so much. We're going into our 2nd season now, and I'm loving it. It's such
really cool.
I would never have had this conversation with you and vice versa if it hadn't have been for the podcast. So no, I'm really grateful for that.
Really cool. What before we go, the end of the podcast, we do Your Art of Being Well, where I just pick your brain on different things for people to get to know even more about you.
Cool.
What's the worst tasting healthy food that you eat? It tastes disgusting, but you do it for the health supportive benefits.
Oh, that is a really good one. You know what? I can share one thing that I was giving my mom and myself at the time when she had cancer was chaga. I don't know if you've had chaga in its purest form.
Oh yeah, it can be pretty gnarly.
I was actually adding, because my mom was like, no, it's disgusting. So I was adding manuka honey, I was adding cacao and trying to come up with a, hot chocolate in disguise. But chaga has amazing health benefits, but it's in its purest form, when when you have the rocks and you boil it on the stove for a long time, it's pretty fresh.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
It's fresh. It's very earthy. What is the weirdest or most out of the box thing you've done for wellness, your wellness, that you're willing to admit on a podcast?
Oh, I should know that. I feel like I've done pretty random things. I'm the type of person that would try, anything and everything. God, I have such baby brain at the moment, forgetting everything. What's one of the weirdest things I've done? I guess, I don't know if it's that weird, but facial acupuncture. Casper's walked in on me having that, and that's pretty scary, and hundreds of needles all over the face and in the ears and things. The salmon sperm facial.
You done that? Or what was that? What's
weird.
That like?
I mean, it's just, I guess if you've had Botox or experienced anything like that, it's kind of all, it's all the same feeling. It's weird, and I feel like we go to such extreme lengths. So yeah, there's nothing I wouldn't try.
Do you feel like would you do the acupuncture, facial acupuncture, where you have needles all over your face? Would you do that again? And when you do the salmon sperm facial again?
I would do them both again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
not that weird.
But
yeah, weird,
it.
but good. Sometimes the weird things are the best things. So I'm open.
Love it. Do you take supplements? And if so, maybe what are 2 lesser known supplements that people should know about that you take?
Yeah, so I actually I listened to Gary Brecker on the Skinny Confidential, and listened to him talking about folic acid versus methylfolate. And obviously you'll know far more about that than me, but I have been taking methylfolate throughout my pregnancy, which, according to Gary Brecker, is really effective in terms of pregnancy, but also at kind of reducing the chances of postnatal depression. So that's one. I don't know if I'm saying everything correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's I would agree with you. And Gary
and
Brecker.
and I guess it's more what I took from the podcast, at least, was that it was more actively available, and the absorption was more.
The bioavailability.
Yeah. So that's one thing I've been doing. And what else? A lesser known. That's a hard one.
Methylfolate, good. That's a good one.
L-theanine, I guess, would. I feel very different having 2 matchas a day. I make it at home. I'm not having the matchas that it's not everyday matcha, it's ceremonial matcha, it's high in L-theanine. So I guess that is something that's lesser known.
How do you make the perfect matcha?
Oh, okay. So I think you need to find a very good quality ceremonial grade matcha. So I use 1 teaspoon, a heaped teaspoon, which is quite strong. I have one of those Stag Fellow kettles, which you can do the temperature. So you don't want to get above, I think in Fahrenheit, it's about 185 Fahrenheit. You don't want to go above that, because that will burn the matcha and make it taste not so nice. So keep it around that, and then I will pour a little bit in the cup, whisk it. It's important you go backwards and forwards rather than in a circular motion. Create the bubbles, fill the cup with the bubbles, release the flavor. Add a little bit more water, and then I will add to my milk frother. I actually bring my milk from London because I'm so specific about my milk, and they don't have the one I like in Denmark. So I will put my milk into the milk frother. I use a combination of oat and almond together, and I know everyone says oat milk is the devil, but I'm not one of those people. But anyway, and then I will add some collagen to the milk frother, and then as I pour the milk in, it's only kind of like, I would say, a third of my cup is milk, and I will stir the water at the same time, so it kind of like blends. That is your perfect. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
Amazing. No, that's what I wanted, and I know that's what the listeners want too.
Okay, good.
When you're in a Joe and the Juice, what's your order?
Okay, so I have a couple. So I make my own green juice. I think a top tip is getting the app, because you can customize without feeling like that annoying customer at the front of the line when everyone's waiting for you and like you're customizing your order, so that you can do it on the app. So I do a green juice which will have celery, cucumber, lemon, and ginger. I think that's what I have. And if I was at the front of the queue, because you couldn't quite customize to this level, I would say, could you put like just a quarter of an apple in, maybe, just for a little bit of sweetness. And then I would do the vegan sandwich plus turkey, which Casper always laughs at me about, and he's like, and then he makes a comment, he says, make sure you're using the vegan turkey. But I just don't like the mozzarella and everything, so I will add the turkey, or I'll just go pure vegetable sandwich. But oh my gosh, it's the bread, it's the crunch, it's the pesto. It's amazing.
I have to try that out.
Have you not tried it yet?
No, I'll do the vegan with the turkey. I'll do the same thing next time I'm at the Pittsburgh airport.
So fun fact for your listeners, Casper, when he first started making the sandwiches himself, he used banana in the pesto because it was cheaper than Parmesan.
Oh, that's funny.
And no one realized. It just tasted like pesto, and I mean, there was banana, so it was all healthy.
That's so good. My friend, where do people go to learn more about all the amazing things you're doing?
Yeah, so you can go to pilatesbybryony.com, or you can download the app on, the iOS store, Pilates by Bryony. You can follow me personally, Bryony Deery, or Bryony Bass. I think it's Bryony Deery, Deery. My podcast is Beyond the Mat, and the matcha is cloudchamatcha.com.
Bryony, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.